we see families saying tearful goodbyes, business travelers glued to their phones, and vacationers buzzing with excitement. Our camera lingers on a few key faces. There's a young couple embarking on their honeymoon, radiating happiness and optimism. A seasoned diplomat, weary from years of service, sips coffee, his expression suggesting a deep understanding of the world's complexities. The nervous young woman clutches a worn teddy bear, her eyes darting around, hinting at a hidden anxiety. And then there's the seemingly innocuous group of men, dressed in casual attire, their faces impassive, their movements coordinated. These aren't just random faces. They're the threads of a tapestry we're about to unravel. The honeymooners represent innocence and the promise of a future threatened by the looming events. The diplomat embodies experience and the weight of responsibility. The anxious woman symbolizes vulnerability and the potential for unexpected resilience. And the coordinated men, well, they are the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. As the passengers board the transatlantic flight, we get glimpses into their lives that a brief phone call reveals. The diplomat is carrying sensitive information. The young woman nervously checks her medication. One of the coordinated men makes a furtive phone call, speaking in hushed tones in a language we don't understand. The universal signal of conspiracy. Inside the plane, the atmosphere is a mix of anticipation and routine. Flight attendants offer drinks. The safety demonstration plays on the overhead screens, and the engines roar to life. The camera sweeps across the cabin, capturing the last moments of normalcy before the sky turns into a battleground. We see the honeymooners holding hands, the diplomat lost in thought, the nervous woman staring out the window, and the coordinated men subtly positioning themselves throughout the aircraft. The plane ascends, leaving the city lights behind. The camera focuses on the altimeter, steadily climbing higher and higher, carrying our unsuspecting passengers further away from safety and closer to the impending storm. This isn't just a flight. It's a descent into chaos, a journey into the heart of a high-stakes thriller where survival is anything but guaranteed. And somewhere, unseen, Jason Statham is about to enter the equation. Key point 2. The takeover. Precisely 15 minutes into the flight, a coordinated group of terrorists, disguised as passengers, initiate their plan, seizing control of the cockpit. The relative calm established in the opening now shatters with brutal efficiency. We need to show the speed and ruthlessness of the takeover, emphasizing the vulnerability of the passengers and the chilling precision of the terrorists. The transition is almost imperceptible. A sudden cough, a dropped bag, a subtle shift in body language. The coordinated men, previously blending into the background, now move with purpose. The leader, identified earlier only by his impassive face, gives a nearly imperceptible nod. The first strike is swift and decisive. One of the men, seated near the cockpit door, rises and produces a concealed weapon, not a firearm, but a high-voltage taser, disabling the flight attendant with a single jolt. Another man, strategically positioned near the lavatory, pulls out a garrote, silently subduing a passenger who attempts to intervene. The element of surprise is their greatest weapon. Before anyone can react, the terrorists have established control of the aisle. Panic begins to spread, a ripple effect of fear washing over the cabin. Passengers scream, children cry, and the initial confusion quickly morphs into terror. Point 2 of the terrorists, armed with knives fashioned from sharpened plastic, undetectable by security, force their way into the cockpit. A brief, violent struggle ensues. The cockpit door, reinforced but not impenetrable, groans under the force. We hear shouts, muffled screams, and the sickening thud of blows. The camera focuses on the flashing lights of the control panel, a chaotic symphony of impending disaster. Within moments, the cockpit is secured. The terrorists, now in control of the aircraft, disable the communication systems, severing contact with ground control. A chilling silence descends upon the cabin, broken only by the sobs of terrified passengers. The leader, now fully revealed as a cold and calculating individual, addresses the passengers in a calm, almost conversational tone. He speaks in fluent English, devoid of emotion. He explains their demands, outlining their political grievances and threatening dire consequences if their demands are not met. He emphasizes that they are not interested in harming the passengers, but that they are willing to sacrifice innocent lives to achieve their goals. His words are chilling, delivered with a detached indifference that is far more terrifying than any shouting or threats. The takeover is complete. The plane, now under the control of ruthless terrorists, veers off course. A metal bird hijacked and transformed into a weapon. The passengers, stripped of their agency and trapped at 30,000 feet, are left to face their worst nightmare. The countdown has begun. Key point 3. Ground control chaos. Air traffic control scrambles to understand the situation as communication is lost. Initial attempts to negotiate fail. While the passengers are trapped in the air, a different kind of chaos erupts on the ground. We need to convey the urgency and frustration of the air traffic controllers and government officials as they grapple with the unfolding crisis. The sudden loss of communication from Flight XYZ triggers immediate alarms at the air traffic control center. The routine hum of the control room is replaced by a cacophony of frantic voices and flashing lights. Controllers desperately try to re-establish contact, but their calls go unanswered. Initial speculation ranges from technical malfunction to pilot error, but as the minutes tick by and the plane deviates from its flight path, a chilling realization dawns. This is no accident. The news quickly reaches the highest levels of government that a crisis management team is assembled, a mix of military officials, intelligence analysts, and political advisors. The room is tense, the air thick with anxiety. The stakes are impossibly high. The first priority is to understand the terrorists' demands. Intelligence agencies scramble to gather information, poring over databases and analyzing potential threats. Initial attempts to contact the hijackers through alternative channels prove fruitless. A seasoned negotiator is brought in, a man with years of experience dealing with hostage situations. He attempts to establish a dialogue using pre-established emergency frequencies, but the terrorists remain silent, their intentions shrouded in mystery. The pressure mounts as the plane continues to fly erratically, its trajectory uncertain. The military is put on high alert. Fighter jets scrambled to intercept the hijacked aircraft. The possibility of shooting down the plane is discussed, a last resort option that weighs heavily on everyone's minds. Meanwhile, within the crisis room, tensions rise as disagreements break out over the best course of action. Some argue for a hardline approach, demanding immediate surrender. Others advocate for a more cautious strategy, emphasizing the need to protect the lives of the innocent passengers. The negotiator finally manages to establish a tenuous link with the terrorists. Their demands are relayed, a complex mix of political grievances and financial demands. The government officials listen intently, their faces grim. The negotiator attempts to stall for time, hoping to gather more information and buy time to formulate a plan. But the terrorists are impatient, their demands becoming increasingly urgent. They issue a series of escalating threats, warning of dire consequences if their demands are not met. The initial attempts to negotiate fail. The terrorists are unyielding, their resolve seemingly unbreakable. The situation is spiraling out of control. Time is running out. As the crisis deepens, the focus shifts to finding a solution, any solution, to avert disaster. And that's when someone mentions a name whispered with a mixture of hope and desperation: Jason Statham. Key point 4. Introducing Statham. Jason Statham, a former Special Forces operative with a troubled past, is revealed to be working security on the ground and is briefed on the unfolding crisis. The whisper of Statham's name hangs in the air, a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming despair. But Statham isn't some invincible superhero. He's a man haunted by his past, a reluctant warrior pulled back into a world he desperately tried to leave behind. We find Statham not in a gleaming headquarters, but in a nondescript security office at a smaller, regional airport. He's deliberately chosen a low-profile life, trading adrenaline-fueled missions for the mundane routine of airport security. He's older, perhaps a little world-weary, but the lethal edge is still there, honed by years of training and combat. His days consist of patrolling terminals, checking IDs, and dealing with the occasional unruly passenger. It's a far cry from his previous life, a life filled with danger, sacrifice, and the ghosts of those he couldn't save. He sought anonymity, a chance to atone for past sins. The call comes unexpectedly, but a stern-faced government agent, bypassing the usual channels, arrives at his office. The urgency etched on his face. The agent briefs Statham on the hijacking, the failed negotiations, and the desperate need for a solution. Statham listens in silence. His expression unreadable. He knows what they're asking him to do, the impossible odds they're expecting him to overcome. He's seen too much death, too much destruction. He's reluctant to return to that world, to confront the demons he's tried so hard to bury. The agent lays out the plan, or rather, the lack thereof. They have no viable options, no realistic strategies. They're grasping at straws, hoping for a miracle. Statham is their last desperate hope. He asks about the passengers, the innocent lives at stake. He sees their faces in his mind's eye, their fear, their desperation. He knows he can't stand idly by while they face certain death. The agent emphasizes the unique skills and experience that make Statham the only man capable of pulling off such a daring mission. He reminds Statham of his past successes, the lives he saved, the sacrifices he made. Statham remains silent, wrestling with his conscience. The decision is agonizing. A battle between his desire for peace and his sense of duty. He knows the risks are immense, the chances of success slim. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, Statham speaks. His voice is low, gravelly, but firm. He agrees to help, but on his own terms. He needs information, resources, and the freedom to operate without interference. The agent nods, relieved. He knows he's asking a lot, but he has no choice. He's willing to give Statham whatever he needs, whatever it takes to save those lives. Statham begins to prepare for the mission. We see a flicker of the old fire in his eyes. The reluctant warrior is back, ready to face the impossible. He knows the odds are stacked against him, but he's not one to back down from a challenge. He's Jason Statham, and he's about to board a flight to hell. Key point 5. The impossible plan. Statham proposes a near-impossible mid-air interception, a risky skyhook maneuver to board the hijacked plane. With Statham now on board, metaphorically and literally, the focus shifts to crafting a plan so audacious, so improbable, that it borders on suicidal. This is where the film truly embraces its action movie DNA. Statham, after reviewing the limited intelligence and analyzing the plane's flight path, presents his solution. That it's not a solution so much as a desperate gamble. A mid-air interception using a highly experimental skyhook system. The skyhook, still in its prototype phase, is designed to allow for the transfer of personnel and equipment between aircraft in flight. It involves a specialized aircraft equipped with a grappling hook that can latch onto another plane, allowing for a brief but potentially life-saving connection. The government officials are stunned. The plan is insane, a suicide mission with virtually no chance of success. They argue against it, pointing out the inherent risks and the potential for catastrophic failure. But Statham is adamant it's the only way to get him onto the plane, the only way to give those passengers a fighting chance. He explains the advantages of surprise, the element of shock that will give him the upper hand against the terrorists. He outlines the technical challenges, the precise coordination required, the extreme G-forces involved, the unpredictable weather conditions. He acknowledges the risks, but he insists that they are outweighed by the potential rewards. The officials reluctantly agree to consider the plan, but they demand a feasibility study, a detailed analysis of the risks and benefits. Statham knows that time is running out, that every minute wasted increases the likelihood of disaster. He assembles a team of engineers, pilots, and technicians, experts in their respective fields. They work around the clock, poring over blueprints, running simulations, and pushing the limits of technology. The team identifies numerous obstacles. The skyhook aircraft is untested in real-world conditions. The transfer maneuver is incredibly complex, and the hijacked plane is flying erratically, making interception even more difficult. They devise a series of modifications to the skyhook system, reinforcing the grappling hook, enhancing the navigation system, and improving the pilot's ability to control the aircraft in extreme conditions. Statham oversees the modifications, pushing the team to their limits, demanding perfection. He knows that every detail matters, that even the smallest mistake could have fatal consequences. The team races against time. The government officials continue to debate the plan. Some remain skeptical, convinced that it's a fool's errand. Others are cautiously optimistic, seeing it as a last, desperate hope. Finally, after hours of intense deliberation, the decision is made. The Skyhook plan is approved, but with strict limitations. Statham is given the green light to proceed, but he's warned that he's on his own. That if anything goes wrong, he'll be disavowed. The government will deny any involvement. He is expendable. Key point 6. Securing the Skyhook. A specialized aircraft and crew are assembled, showcasing the technical challenges and the slim odds of success. With the impossible plan approved, the next challenge is making it a reality. This section focuses on the logistical hurdles, the technical complexities, and the sheer audacity of trying to pull off a mid-air transfer at 30,000 feet. The Skyhook aircraft, a modified C-130 Hercules, is a marvel of engineering and a testament to human ingenuity, but it's also a temperamental beast, prone to malfunctions and unpredictable behavior. The team assigned to the mission is a mix of seasoned veterans and brilliant young minds, all handpicked for their expertise and unwavering dedication. The pilot, a grizzled Air Force veteran named Mac, is a master of the skies, a man who has flown in every imaginable condition that he's seen combat, faced death, and lived to tell the tale. That he's skeptical of the Skyhook plan, but he trusts Statham and he's willing to risk his life to save those passengers. The crew includes a team of engineers responsible for maintaining the Skyhook system, a navigator who will guide the aircraft to the interception point, and a communications specialist who will maintain contact with ground control. As they prepare the aircraft, the team faces a series of challenges. The Skyhook grappling hook is prone to jamming, the navigation system is unreliable, and the weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Statham works alongside the team, offering his expertise and pushing them to find solutions to the problems. That he knows that every detail matters, that even the smallest mistake could have catastrophic consequences. The engineers work tirelessly, modifying the grappling hook, enhancing the navigation system, and reinforcing the aircraft structure. They push the limits of technology, pushing themselves to the breaking point. Mac runs through countless simulations, practicing the interception maneuver, honing his skills to perfection. That he knows that he has only one chance to get it right. As the team prepares for the mission, the tension in the hangar is palpable. Everyone knows the risks, the slim odds of success, but they are all committed to the mission, driven by a sense of duty and a desire to save those lives. The Skyhook aircraft is finally ready. It's a powerful machine, a symbol of human ingenuity and determination, but it's also a fragile vessel, vulnerable to the unpredictable forces of nature. As the aircraft taxis onto the runway, Statham addresses the crew. That he thanks them for their hard work, their dedication, and their willingness to risk their lives. That he reminds them of the stakes, the innocent lives hanging in the balance. The aircraft takes off, soaring into the darkening sky. The team is on their way, embarking on a mission that is both audacious and terrifying. The fate of Flight XYZ and the lives of its passengers now rests in their hands. The sky, once a symbol of freedom, has become a battleground. Key point 7. Mid-air transfer. The Skyhook connects. Statham, battling intense G-forces and turbulence, makes the perilous transfer to the hijacked plane. Now comes the moment of truth. All the planning, all the preparation, all the risks culminate in this single, heart-stopping maneuver. This is where the film ratchets up the tension to unbearable levels. Inside the Skyhook aircraft, the atmosphere is electric. Mac expertly maneuvers the plane into position, matching the speed and altitude of the hijacked airliner. The turbulence is severe, buffeting the aircraft violently. Statham, strapped into a specialized harness, prepares for the transfer. That he's calm, focused, his face a mask of determination. He knows that one wrong move could mean certain death. The Skyhook grappling hook extends, reaching out towards the hijacked plane. The tension is unbearable as the hook closes, latching onto the airliner with a deafening clang. The two aircraft are now connected, a precarious bridge spanning the vast expanse of the sky. The transfer platform extends, a narrow walkway suspended thousands of feet above the earth. Statham takes a deep breath and steps onto the platform. The wind howls, the aircraft lurches violently, and the ground seems miles away. He fights to maintain his balance, his every step a test of courage and skill. As he crosses the platform, He's buffeted by intense G-forces. His vision blurs, his muscles strain, and he feels like he's being crushed under immense pressure. Suddenly, the skyhook grappling hook malfunctions, threatening to sever the connection between the two aircraft. The platform lurches violently, throwing Statham off balance that he manages to grab onto a safety railing. Narrowly avoiding a fatal plunge, he clings to the railing, his body swaying in the wind, his grip weakening. Mac fights to regain control of the skyhook aircraft, battling the turbulence and the malfunctioning equipment that he knows that Statham's life and the lives of the passengers on the hijacked plane depend on his ability to keep the connection intact. Statham pulls himself back onto the platform, his body aching, his spirit unbroken. He continues his perilous journey, his determination fueled by the thought of the innocent lives he's trying to save. Finally, he reaches the hijacked plane that he grabs onto the fuselage. Pulling himself towards a small access hatch that he forces the hatch open. Squeezing through the narrow opening, he's inside the plane. The mid-air transfer is complete that he's alive. But the real battle has just begun. He's now alone, facing a group of ruthless terrorists, trapped at 30,000 feet. The odds are stacked against him, but he's Jason Statham, and he's ready to fight. Key point 8. Initial confrontation. Statham silently eliminates a lone terrorist guarding a key access point, establishing his brutal efficiency. Now inside the hijacked plane, Statham operates with lethal precision. This scene needs to be swift, brutal, and silent, establishing Statham's capabilities and setting the tone for the rest of the onboard action. He finds himself in a cramped maintenance compartment, the air thick with the smell of fuel and hydraulic fluid. He quickly assesses the situation, identifying the most immediate threat, a lone terrorist guarding a nearby access point, presumably to prevent anyone from interfering with the cockpit. The terrorist, young and inexperienced, is armed with a makeshift knife and appears nervous, glancing around anxiously. He's the weakest link, the one Statham can exploit to gain a foothold. Statham moves silently, like a shadow, using the narrow confines of the compartment to his advantage. He relies on his years of training, his instincts honed by countless combat situations. He closes the distance between himself and the terrorist in a matter of seconds, moving with a speed and agility that belies his age. The terrorist doesn't even have time to react. Statham strikes with brutal efficiency. He uses a pressure point technique to disable the terrorist, rendering him unconscious without making a sound. He then secures the terrorist's weapon, adding it to his limited arsenal that he drags the unconscious terrorist into a secluded corner, concealing him from view. That he needs to buy himself time to move undetected through the plane. He examines the access point, identifying it as a service hatch that leads to a lower cargo hold. It's not his primary objective, but it could provide a useful escape route or a strategic advantage later on. That he moves towards the main cabin, his senses on high alert. He can hear the muffled sounds of the passengers, their fear palpable. He knows that he needs to act quickly to neutralize the terrorists before they harm any more innocent lives. He reaches the door leading to the main cabin. Pausing to listen, he can hear the terrorist leader addressing the passengers, his voice calm and menacing. Statham takes a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation to come. He knows that he's facing a formidable challenge, but he's not afraid. That he's Jason Statham, and he's about to unleash hell on these terrorists. He opens the door and steps into the main cabin, his eyes scanning the scene. The passengers are huddled together, their faces etched with fear. The terrorists are scattered throughout the cabin, their weapons drawn, their eyes watchful. Statham knows that he can't afford to make a mistake. He needs to choose his next move carefully to exploit every advantage he can find. The battle for Flight XYZ has begun. Key point 9. Close quarters combat. Statham systematically moves through the plane, engaging in intense hand-to-hand combat in the narrow confines of the aircraft, using improvised weapons. The initial silence is shattered by the eruption of close quarters combat. This section showcases Statham's fighting prowess, his resourcefulness, and the claustrophobic intensity of the battles within the confined space of the aircraft. Statham's entry into the main cabin is a calculated risk. He doesn't charge in guns blazing. He observes, analyzes, and plans his attack. That he uses the environment to his advantage, exploiting blind spots, shadows, and the limited space to create opportunities. His first target is a terrorist positioned near the front of the cabin, guarding the aisle. Statham uses a combination of speed and misdirection, creating a diversion that allows him to close the distance undetected. The ensuing fight is brutal and efficient. Statham relies on hand-to-hand combat, using his training and experience to overwhelm his opponent. That he utilizes pressure points, joint locks, and disarming techniques to quickly neutralize the terrorist. He improvises weapons from the environment, using seatbelt buckles, serving trays, and even the oxygen masks to gain an advantage. He's resourceful and adaptable, turning everyday objects into deadly tools. The narrow confines of the aircraft make the combat even more intense. There's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The passengers are caught in the crossfire, their fear amplified by the close proximity to the violence. Statham moves systematically through the plane, taking down the terrorists one by one. That he uses stealth, surprise, and overwhelming force to gain the upper hand. Each fight is different. Each terrorist presents a unique challenge. Some are skilled fighters, others are inexperienced and easily intimidated. Statham adapts his tactics to each opponent, exploiting their weaknesses and maximizing his strengths. That he uses the element of surprise to his advantage, appearing unexpectedly from behind seats, from inside lavatories, and from the overhead compartments. He's a ghost, a phantom, striking from the shadows. The terrorists are caught off guard, their carefully laid plans unraveling. They become increasingly desperate, resorting to more extreme measures. The terrorist leader, witnessing the chaos unfolding, becomes increasingly agitated. He realizes that Statham is a formidable opponent, a threat to his entire operation. That he orders his remaining terrorists to focus on eliminating Statham, offering a reward for his capture or death. The hunt is on. The battle for Flight XYZ intensifies. Key point 10. Passenger assistance. Some passengers, inspired by Statham's bravery, begin to subtly assist him, creating distractions and providing intel. As Statham wages his one-man war against the terrorists, a subtle shift occurs within the cabin. Hope, sparked by his actions, begins to flicker in the hearts of some passengers, leading them to find small but meaningful ways to assist him. The initial fear and paralysis begin to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of defiance. Passengers, initially huddled in terror, start to observe, to analyze, to look for opportunities to help. The honeymooning couple, initially clinging to each other in fear, begin to communicate silently, using coded gestures to relay information about the terrorists' movements. The husband, a former college athlete, uses his physical presence to create distractions, subtly blocking the terrorists' line of sight. The wife, a medical student, uses her knowledge to tend to the wounded, providing cover for Statham to move undetected. The diplomat, initially resigned to his fate, uses his diplomatic skills to sow seeds of doubt among the terrorists, subtly questioning their motives and their leadership. He engages them in conversation, diverting their attention and creating opportunities for Statham to strike. The nervous young woman, initially paralyzed by anxiety, discovers a hidden strength within herself. She uses her knowledge of the aircraft's layout to provide Statham with crucial intel, pointing out hidden compartments, service hatches, and emergency exits. She even manages to disable a security camera, giving Statham a blind spot to operate in. These acts of resistance are small, but they are significant. They demonstrate the power of the human spirit, the ability to find courage in the face of overwhelming fear. They also provide Statham with crucial support, giving him the edge he needs to overcome the terrorists. The passengers' assistance is not without risk. The terrorists are quick to punish any sign of defiance, resorting to violence and intimidation. But the passengers are undeterred, their determination fueled by a desire to survive and to help Statham succeed. The terrorist leader, realizing that the passengers are turning against him, becomes increasingly paranoid. He tightens his grip on the cabin, increasing security and cracking down on any sign of resistance. But the passengers are too smart, too resourceful. They find ways to circumvent the terrorists' security measures, using their ingenuity and their collective will to support Statham's mission. The battle for Flight XYZ is no longer just a one-man war. It's a collective effort, a testament to the power of human solidarity. The passengers, inspired by Statham's bravery, are fighting back, reclaiming their freedom one small act of defiance at a time. Key point 11. The leader revealed. The terrorist leader, a hardened and intelligent strategist, is identified, and a tense cat-and-mouse game begins, while Statham deals with the rank-and-file terrorists. The true antagonist emerges, a cunning and ruthless leader whose motivations are more complex than simple fanaticism. This section focuses on the psychological battle between Statham and the leader, highlighting their contrasting ideologies and strategic approaches. The terrorist leader, revealed to be a former intelligence operative named Kovac, is not just a mindless zealot. He's a skilled strategist, a master manipulator, and a hardened survivor. He's the brains behind the hijacking. The architect of the plan, Kovac observes Statham's progress with a mixture of fascination and contempt. That he recognizes Statham's skill and his determination, but he believes that he can outwit him, that he can exploit his weaknesses, that he uses the passengers as pawns in his game, threatening to harm them if Statham doesn't surrender. That he attempts to turn the passengers against Statham, painting him as a reckless vigilante who is putting their lives at risk. Statham, however, is not easily intimidated. He understands Kovac's tactics, and he refuses to be manipulated. He continues his mission, systematically eliminating the terrorists and disrupting Kovac's plans. That a tense cat-and-mouse game begins. Statham and Kovac engage in a battle of wits, each trying to outmaneuver the other. They use the aircraft as their chessboard, the passengers as their pieces. Kovac uses the aircraft's communication system to broadcast propaganda, attempting to justify his actions and to rally support for his cause. That he reveals his grievances, outlining his political agenda and his demands. Statham uses the same system to counter Kovac's propaganda, appealing to the passengers' sense of hope and their desire to survive. That he reminds them that they are not alone, that they are all in this together. The psychological battle intensifies. Kovac tries to break Statham's spirit, revealing details about his past, his failures, and his personal tragedies. That he attempts to exploit Statham's guilt and his self-doubt. Statham refuses to be broken. That he acknowledges his past mistakes, but he refuses to let them define him. That he is focused on the present, on the mission at hand. That he understands that Kovac's ultimate goal is to demoralize him, to make him question his own motives. That he refuses to give him that satisfaction. The confrontation between Statham and Kovac becomes inevitable. They are two sides of the same coin, two men shaped by violence and tragedy. Their final showdown will determine the fate of Flight XYZ. Key point 12. Explosive threat. The terrorists reveal they have planted explosives throughout the plane, escalating the urgency and stakes. Just as Statham seems to be gaining the upper hand, Kovac unveils his trump card: explosives strategically placed throughout the aircraft. This revelation dramatically raises the stakes, forcing Statham to not only fight the terrorists, but also race against time to disarm the bombs before it's too late. Kovac, realizing that his control over the passengers is slipping and that Statham is a more formidable opponent than he anticipated, resorts to a desperate measure. He announces to the cabin that the plane is rigged with explosives, set to detonate if their demands are not met. He displays a detonator, holding it aloft for all to see. That he explains that the explosives are powerful enough to destroy the entire aircraft, turning it into a fiery tomb. Panic erupts in the cabin. The passengers, already traumatized by the hijacking and the violence, are now faced with the prospect of imminent death. Hope gives way to despair. Statham, however, remains calm. He knows that Kovac is bluffing, that he wouldn't detonate the explosives unless he was absolutely certain that his demands would not be met. But he also knows that he can't afford to take any chances. He uses his knowledge of explosives to assess the threat. He knows that the terrorists would have had to smuggle the explosives onto the plane, a difficult task given the airport security measures. That he theorizes that the explosives are likely homemade, relatively small, and strategically placed to maximize their impact. He also believes that the terrorists may have exaggerated the power of the explosives to create fear and panic. He begins to search the plane, using his senses to detect the explosives. He looks for suspicious packages, unusual wires, and any sign of tampering. The passengers, initially paralyzed by fear, begin to assist Statham in his search. They use their collective knowledge of the aircraft to identify potential hiding places. The search is fraught with danger. The terrorists are on high alert, watching every move. Statham has to be careful not to alert them to his intentions that he finds the first explosive hidden in a lavatory, concealed behind a mirror. It's a crude device. Made from plastic explosives and a timer, he disarms the explosive, using his knowledge of electronics and his quick thinking that he knows that there are more explosives hidden throughout the plane, and that he has to find them quickly. The clock is ticking. The passengers' lives are hanging in the balance. Statham is the only one who can save them. The battle for Flight XYZ has entered a new, even more dangerous phase. Key point 13. Defusing the bombs. While continuing to fight, Statham must also locate and disable the explosives, relying on his expertise and quick thinking. The explosive threat adds a ticking clock element to the already intense situation. This section focuses on Statham's bomb disposal skills, his ability to remain calm under pressure, and the ingenuity he employs to overcome the terrorists' deadly devices. Statham's search for the explosives becomes a frantic race against time. He has to balance his efforts to eliminate the remaining terrorists with the urgent need to disarm the bombs. He relies on his knowledge of explosives, his understanding of electronics, and his quick thinking to disarm the devices that he uses. Improvised tools, such as paper clips, nail clippers, and even chewing gum, to disable the timers and neutralize the detonators. Each bomb presents a unique challenge. Some are simple and crude, others are more sophisticated and complex. Statham has to adapt his techniques to each device, relying on his instincts and his training. He finds another explosive hidden in the overhead compartment. Disguised as a carry-on bag, he disarms it just seconds before it's set to detonate. He finds a third explosive hidden in the cockpit, wired to the aircraft's control panel. Disarming this device is particularly dangerous, as any wrong move could trigger the detonation. He uses his expertise to bypass the security measures, carefully cutting the wires and disabling the detonator. He's successful, but he knows that there are still more explosives hidden throughout the plane. The terrorists, realizing that Statham is disarming the bombs, become increasingly desperate. They focus their efforts on stopping him, attempting to sabotage his efforts and to protect the remaining explosives. Kovac, watching from the cockpit, becomes increasingly frustrated. He realizes that his plan is unraveling, that Statham is a more formidable opponent than he anticipated. He orders his remaining terrorists to detonate the explosives remotely, but Statham manages to jam the signal, preventing the detonation. The battle for Flight XYZ reaches its climax. Statham is exhausted, wounded, and running out of time. But he refuses to give up. He's determined to save the passengers, even if it costs him his own life. He finds the final explosive hidden in the cargo hold, wired to the aircraft's fuel tank. This is the most dangerous device of all, capable of destroying the entire plane. He knows that he has to disarm it quickly, but he also knows that any wrong move could trigger the detonation. He takes a deep breath, steels himself for the challenge, and prepares to face his ultimate test. Key point 14. Cockpit showdown. Statham finally reaches the cockpit for a final, brutal confrontation with the remaining terrorists, including the leader, with the explosives largely neutralized, or at least the most dangerous ones. Statham's focus shifts to the cockpit and the final confrontation with Kovac. This is the climax of the action, a brutal and personal showdown between two men driven by different ideologies. The journey to the cockpit is fraught with danger. Statham has to fight his way through the remaining terrorists, each one more desperate and determined than the last. He uses his skills, his training, and his resourcefulness to overcome them. He improvises weapons from the environment, using seatbelt buckles, serving trays, and even fire extinguishers. He relies on the assistance of the passengers, who continue to provide him with intel, create distractions, and sabotage the terrorists' efforts. He finally reaches the cockpit door, but it's locked and reinforced. He knows that he has to find a way to get inside. But he also knows that Kovac is waiting for him. He uses his knowledge of engineering to bypass the security measures, disabling the locking mechanism and forcing the door open. He bursts into the cockpit, guns blazing. Kovac and his remaining henchmen are waiting for him, armed and ready for a fight. The ensuing battle is brutal and intense. Statham and Kovac engage in a hand-to-hand combat, each one determined to defeat the other. They fight with a ferocity and a skill that is both terrifying and mesmerizing. They use every weapon at their disposal, including knives, guns, and even their bare hands. The cockpit is small and cramped, making the combat even more dangerous. The aircraft is lurching and shaking, adding to the chaos and confusion. Statham manages to disarm Kovac, but he's wounded in the process. Kovac is still a formidable opponent. Even without a weapon, they continue to fight, their bodies bruised and battered, their spirits unbroken. They are two sides of the same coin, two men driven by different ideologies, locked in a battle to the death. Finally, Statham manages to gain the upper hand. He overpowers Kovac, disarming him and knocking him to the ground. He stands over Kovac, his gun pointed at his head. He has a chance to kill him, to end the threat once and for all. But he hesitates. He knows that killing Kovac. Key point 15. Saving the plane. With the plane in a steep dive, Statham must regain control and execute an emergency landing, relying on his piloting skills or a helpful co-pilot. The battle with Kovac may be over, but the crisis isn't. The plane is now in a perilous state, spiraling downwards, and Statham must use all his skills and experience to avert a catastrophic crash. This section combines action and suspense, showcasing Statham's versatility and the fragility of their situation. That he looks at Kovac, who is lying on the floor, defeated but defiant. He makes the split-second decision to spare his life. Knowing that killing him wouldn't solve anything, that he turns his attention to the controls, realizing that the plane is in a steep dive. The autopilot is disabled, and the instruments are malfunctioning. That he tries to regain control, but the plane is responding erratically. That he's not a pilot, but he has some basic knowledge of aviation. That he remembers his training, his instincts kicking in. He adjusts the flaps, the ailerons, and the rudder, trying to stabilize the aircraft. He realizes that he needs help. He calls out to the passengers, asking if anyone has any piloting experience. A voice answers. It's the diplomat, the seasoned negotiator. He reveals that he's a former Air Force pilot, with thousands of hours of flight time. Statham is relieved. He allows the diplomat to take over the controls, guiding him through the emergency procedures. Together, they work to regain control of the plane. The diplomat uses his skills and experience to stabilize the aircraft, while Statham provides support and guidance. They manage to pull the plane out of the dive, but they're still in a dangerous situation. That they're flying at a low altitude, and they're running out of fuel. They need to find a safe place to land, and they need to do it quickly. They contact air traffic control, requesting assistance. The controllers guide them towards a nearby airport, providing them with information about the runway, the wind conditions, and the approach procedures. The landing is fraught with danger. The plane is damaged, the instruments are unreliable, and the weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Statham and the diplomat work together, coordinating their actions and communicating clearly. They manage to guide the plane towards the runway, but the landing is going to be rough. They brace for impact, knowing that anything could happen. The plane hits the runway hard, bouncing and shaking violently. They manage to keep the plane on the runway, slowing it down and bringing it to a stop. They've done it. They've saved the plane. Key point 16. Final moments. The plane lands safely, or crash lands with minimal casualties. Statham disappears into the crowd, a silent hero, leaving behind a grateful group of survivors. With the plane safely on the ground, the immediate crisis is over. This section focuses on the aftermath, the emotional impact on the survivors, and Statham's quiet departure. Solidifying his image as a reluctant hero, the plane screeches to a halt on the runway, surrounded by emergency vehicles. Sirens wail, lights flash, and paramedics rush to the scene. The passengers, shaken but alive, begin to disembark, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and trauma. They hug each other, cry, and thank God for their survival. The honeymooning couple cling to each other, their love strengthened by the ordeal. The diplomat, his face etched with weariness, offers a silent nod of gratitude to Statham. The nervous young woman, now radiating confidence, clutches her teddy bear tightly. They all look for Statham, the man who saved their lives. But he's nowhere to be found. That he's slipped away, disappearing into the crowd of first responders and airport personnel. He doesn't want recognition. He doesn't want praise. He just wants to disappear, to return to his quiet life. He walks away from the scene, his body aching, his spirit wearied. He's done his job. He's saved the passengers, And now it's time for him to move on. He sees the government agent waiting for him, a knowing look on his face. The agent offers Statham a ride, but he declines that he prefers to walk, to clear his head. To process what has happened, he needs to distance himself from the violence, from the chaos, from the ghosts of his past. As he walks away, he glances back at the plane. Seeing the survivors being tended to by the paramedics, he smiles faintly. Knowing that he made a difference, he continues his journey, disappearing into the anonymity of the city. He's a silent hero, a guardian angel, a man who stepped up when others couldn't. The survivors will never forget him. They will tell his story for years to come, passing down the legend of the man who single-handedly saved them from certain death. But Statham doesn't need their gratitude. He doesn't need their recognition. He knows what he did, and that's enough. That he's Jason Statham, and he's a hero, whether he likes it or not. Key point 17. Epilogue. Brief scenes showing the aftermath for the key passengers. Perhaps a fleeting glimpse of Statham back in his quiet life, hinting at future adventures. The main crisis is resolved, but the story doesn't end there. A brief epilogue allows us to see the lasting impact of the hijacking on the survivors and offers a glimpse into Statham's future. That we see the honeymooning couple renewing their vows in a small chapel, their love strengthened by the shared trauma. They are grateful for a second chance at life, a chance to build a future together. The diplomat, now retired from his position, writes a book about his experiences, dedicating a chapter to the man who saved their lives. That he never reveals Statham's name, but he describes his courage and his selflessness, hoping to inspire others to do the same. The nervous young woman, now confident and self-assured, travels the world, embracing life to the fullest. She carries her teddy bear with her, a reminder of the ordeal she survived and the strength she discovered within herself. We see Kovac, sitting in a prison cell, contemplating his failures. That he's lost everything, his cause, his followers, his freedom. He's a broken man, haunted by the memories of what he did. Finally, we see Statham back in his quiet life, working security at the regional airport. He's older, perhaps a little more world-weary, but the lethal edge is still there. He's patrolling the terminals, checking IDs, and dealing with the occasional unruly passenger. He's found a measure of peace, a sense of normalcy. But he knows that his life will never be the same. He's been touched by greatness. He's seen the best and the worst of humanity. He's a changed man. As he walks through the airport, he notices a suspicious group of men, their faces impassive, their movements